Sarah sat in the small cafe, staring out the window as the rain fell steadily, tapping against the glass. It was a typical gray afternoon in the town of Harrington, a place where nothing much ever seemed to change. The familiar hum of quiet conversations and the clinking of coffee cups provided a sense of normalcy that Sarah craved. Her mind, however, was far from peaceful. Her fiancé, Ryan, had passed away just months ago, leaving a hole in her heart that nothing seemed to fill. She absent-mindedly stirred her coffee, watching the liquid swirl, not tasting it. The pregnancy test she had taken only a few days ago still felt surreal in her mind. Pregnant. It was a word she had never fully imagined in the context of her life, let alone with Ryan no longer by her side. The pregnancy news had come as both a shock and a bittersweet blessing. They had been planning their life together, marriage, a future filled with children, growing old together. But that dream was shattered when Ryan died in a tragic car accident. Sarah's world had crumbled in an instant, leaving her to navigate the overwhelming grief alone. She was still reeling from the shock, unable to fully grasp the reality of his absence. Every corner of their small apartment reminded her of him, his shoes by the door, the scent of his cologne lingering on the pillow, his laugh echoing in her mind. The pain was suffocating, like a heavy weight on her chest that never lifted. Yet, there was a flicker of something else inside her, an unexpected hope. The pregnancy gave her a sense of purpose, a reason to keep moving forward, but it also forced her to confront the immense sadness that overshadowed everything. Sarah's friends and family had tried to comfort her, offering words of encouragement and support, but nothing felt genuine. She didn't want to talk about how she felt, she didn't want to hear how she should grieve or how she should feel. They didn't understand. No one truly did. They hadn't lost Ryan. They hadn't stood by his hospital bed, watching as the machines beeped steadily, knowing that the man she loved would never open his eyes again. They hadn't felt the empty silence in their apartment after his death, or the way everything seemed to stop. The world had kept moving, but Sarah's world had come to a screeching halt. She wasn't sure who she was anymore, or how to carry on without him. On this particular afternoon, Sarah had decided to take a walk, something she hadn't done much of since Ryan passed. The weather outside matched her mood, dull, cold, and gray. The cafe was a refuge, a place where she could sit and gather her thoughts, even if they seemed jumbled. She had been avoiding the graveyard since Ryan's funeral. It felt too final, too painful to stand over his grave and try to find closure. But the pregnancy had changed things. It was as though she could feel Ryan's presence in the small life growing inside her. There was a connection she couldn't explain, a quiet whisper in her heart that told her she needed to visit him. To say goodbye, even though it felt impossible. The rain had stopped by the time Sarah left the cafe, and the streets of Harrington seemed unusually empty for a Saturday afternoon. She walked slowly, her steps deliberate, as if she were navigating a foggy memory. The graveyard wasn't far from the cafe, tucked away behind rows of tall trees. The gates loomed ahead, wrought iron twisted into delicate shapes, the kind of design you might expect to see in a forgotten storybook. It was a peaceful place, or it had been, until Ryan's funeral had turned it into a place of sorrow. Now, every step toward the entrance was a reminder of the pain she carried with her. Sarah hesitated for a moment before walking through the gates, feeling a lump form in her throat. The graveyard was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the distant rustle of leaves. The tall gravestones rose like silent sentinels, each one a testament to the lives lived and lost. She made her way to Ryan's grave, her heart pounding in her chest. There, beneath the large oak tree they had planted together on the day they bought their first house, Ryan lay. His grave was modest, simple. Just the way he would have wanted it. There were no grand monuments or elaborate designs. Just his name engraved on a weathered stone and the date of his birth and death. Sarah knelt beside the grave, her fingers brushing the cool stone. She whispered his name, tears welling up in her eyes. it still didn't feel real. She still couldn't believe he was gone. The moment was heavy, the weight of grief pressing in on her chest. She had always thought that by now, months after his death, she would feel some sort of peace. Some acceptance. But it hadn't come. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, a moment to feel the ache that had been with her every day since Ryan's death. The wind picked up, rustling the branches above her, and Sarah's eyes fluttered open, wiping away a stray tear. As she stood up, her gaze wandered over the grave site, taking in the familiar landscape. And that's when she noticed it. Something small, out of place, tucked just beside the base of Ryan's gravestone. It was a phone. An old phone, with a cracked screen and an unfamiliar brand. It wasn't like any phone Sarah recognized. It was bulky, with an odd shape and an outdated design, but it was clearly new, too new to have been left by accident. Her first instinct was to leave it alone. Perhaps it had been misplaced by a visitor. But there was something about it, something that caught her attention. The phone seemed out of place, almost as though it were deliberately left there. Sarah's heart raced as she crouched down beside it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up, turning it over in her hands. It was cold, almost unnaturally so. She felt a strange pull, as if the phone were calling to her. The curiosity gnawed at her, and despite herself, she pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, casting an eerie glow in the twilight. For a moment, nothing happened. Sarah stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. Then, a message appeared on the screen. It was short, simple, and yet entirely impossible. "I'm still here." Her pulse quickened. The words seemed to pulse with life, as though they were coming from someone on the other side. She glanced around, almost expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, watching her. But there was no one. Just the stillness of the graveyard. Her mind raced. This wasn't possible. Ryan was gone. She had seen the body. She had been there at the funeral. And yet, "I'm still here." The words repeated in her mind, a haunting refrain. Sarah's hands shook as she turned the phone over again, checking for any sign of where it had come from. There was no name on the screen, no clues as to its origin. The phone appeared to be completely functional, which made no sense at all. She had expected it to be a broken relic, left behind by someone in grief. But this phone was far too new, far too present. She couldn't explain it. The uncertainty of it all gnawed at her, and for a moment, she felt a sense of dread, like something unseen was watching her, waiting for her next move. As the evening light began to fade, Sarah stood alone in the graveyard, the weight of the phone in her hand suddenly feeling like a burden. The question hung in the air, what was this phone doing here? Why had it appeared at Ryan's grave, and why had it been left for her to find? The air seemed colder now, and the silence more oppressive. Sarah swallowed hard, her heart still pounding in her chest. She wanted to leave, to forget this strange moment ever happened. But something about the phone wouldn't let her go. It called to her in a way she couldn't understand. And so, with a final glance at Ryan's grave, she turned and walked away, the phone still clutched tightly in her hand. The walk back to her apartment felt like a dream. The world around her seemed distant, as if she were moving through a haze. Sarah couldn't shake the image of the phone, its screen lighting up with those impossible words, "I'm still here." Every step she took was filled with a growing sense of unease, yet there was an undeniable pull to understand what had just happened. She had never been one to believe in supernatural occurrences or ghost stories. But now, as the phone sat in her bag, she couldn't help but feel a deep, nagging sense of foreboding. It wasn't just the phone itself, but the context, the graveyard, Ryan's grave, the message. Everything felt wrong, like a puzzle missing a key piece. When she arrived at her apartment, Sarah immediately locked the door behind her. It was a small one-bedroom place, a place she had chosen because it had once felt like home, a place where Ryan had promised to return to after a long day of work. The walls, now bare and cold, carried memories that weighed on her. She tossed her bag on the couch and stood in the doorway for a long moment, just staring at the phone still nestled inside. She wanted to forget about it, pretend that she had imagined the entire thing, but something inside her urged her to look again. Slowly, she reached into her bag, pulling out the strange device. It was heavier than she had expected. She turned it over in her hands, inspecting it more closely this time. The cracked screen was the only noticeable sign of age. The edges were worn, as if it had been through something traumatic. The phone was definitely old, there was no doubt about that, but it wasn't ancient. There was a strange logo on the back, a symbol she didn't recognize. It looked like a triangle within a circle, an intricate design that seemed almost out of place. It had no obvious brand name, no obvious indicator of its manufacturer. Sarah furrowed her brow. Why would anyone bring such a device to a graveyard? And why had it been left at Ryan's grave? These questions swirled in her mind, but she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. With trembling hands, Sarah pressed the power button once again, and the phone lit up in the dim room. The screen flickered for a moment before stabilizing. To her shock, the message was gone. Instead, a new one appeared. I know you're going to read this. You need to know the truth. Her heart skipped a beat. The words seemed to echo in her mind, the chill of the room intensifying. The message was far too specific. Far too personal. There was no way it was a coincidence. She felt her breath catch in her throat as she read the words over and over again. You need to know the truth. Her fingers hovered over the screen, and with a trembling swipe, she opened the message. The new text was even more unsettling. Ryan had a secret. I don't know how to tell you, but you need to know. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. Her first instinct was to throw the phone away, to pretend it wasn't happening. But something held her back. She didn't know if it was curiosity or a desperate need for closure, but she couldn't bring herself to turn it off just yet. What secret? Ryan had never been secretive with her. He had been open, loving, and had always promised that they would face everything together. So what could this phone possibly be referring to? The phone buzzed, vibrating in her hand as a new message arrived. It was a photo. Sarah froze. She knew Ryan had never sent her a photo through an unknown device. The image that appeared on the screen was a picture of the two of them, standing together at their favorite spot by the lake. It was a beautiful photo, the sun setting behind them, casting a warm glow over their faces. But the photo had a strange, almost eerie quality to it. The image was fuzzy, as though it had been taken through a foggy lens. In the corner of the photo was a shadowy figure, someone standing just out of focus, half hidden in the trees. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Who was that? She had never noticed anyone else in the picture before. Had someone been watching them? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She zoomed in on the figure, trying to make sense of it, but the shadow was just that, shadowy and indistinct. Her fingers trembled as she placed the phone down on the table, staring at it. Her mind raced. The messages, the photograph, it was too much to process all at once. She needed answers. She needed to understand what was going on. But who could she turn to? She couldn't go to her friends. They would think she was losing her mind, that grief had taken over and twisted her perception of reality. Her family would only worry more. This wasn't something she could share. The fear of being judged or seen as irrational held her back, but she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. Sarah spent the rest of the evening pacing around her apartment, trying to decide what to do. She couldn't get the image of the shadowy figure out of her head. It was as though someone had been watching them all along, watching her and Ryan. But why? She couldn't make sense of it. She had to know who was behind this, and why they were reaching out to her now. As the night wore on, Sarah made a decision. She would go back to the graveyard in the morning. She had to find answers, even if it meant confronting whatever was behind this phone. The thought made her stomach turn, but there was something inside her that wouldn't let go. She didn't believe in ghosts or spirits, but the phone, the messages, it was too real to ignore. And if Ryan had kept something from her, something that might be tied to his death, she needed to know. She couldn't move forward until she understood. The next morning, Sarah stood outside Ryan's grave once more, the air heavy with the scent of freshly fallen leaves. It was a stark contrast to the previous day's storm. She had come prepared this time, with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in weeks. The graveyard was still as quiet as ever, the silence only broken by the occasional sound of birdsong. She walked slowly toward the spot where she had found the phone the day before. Her heart pounded as she reached Ryan's gravestone, and there, just as she had feared, was another phone. It was identical to the one she had found the day before. She stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. What was going on? Who had left this here? It couldn't be a coincidence. She bent down and picked up the second phone, her hands shaking. Her thoughts were scattered, each one more frantic than the last. She couldn't stay here. She had to take the phone back to her apartment and examine it. Maybe it would have the answers she was looking for. The walk back to her apartment felt even longer than before. She clutched the phone tightly, refusing to let it out of her sight. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for her, something unknown and dangerous. As she entered her apartment, Sarah placed both phones on the table in front of her. She could feel the weight of the situation, the pressure building as the mystery deepened. Who was behind this? What did they want from her? And why were they leaving these phones at Ryan's grave? She opened the second phone, and once again, the screen flickered to life. The message was waiting for her, just as it had been the day before. I've been trying to reach you. Ryan's secret is more dangerous than you can imagine. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There it was again. A warning. A message from someone who knew something she didn't. She wasn't sure whether to be terrified or relieved. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. The following days felt like an endless whirlwind. Sarah's sense of reality had blurred to the point where she could no longer tell whether she was still living in the same world. Each morning, she would wake up and look at the two phones on the kitchen table, still sitting there as reminders of the surreal messages they had contained. The strange phrase, Ryan's secret is more dangerous than you can imagine, haunted her thoughts at every waking moment. The mystery was unraveling faster than she could comprehend, and it was leading her down a path she had never expected to walk. The police, as much as she wanted to involve them, seemed too far removed from her reality to offer any real help. She had called them at one point, but when she explained the situation, they brushed her off. "You're grieving," the officer had said, his voice cold and dismissive. "This sounds like a sign of trauma. Maybe you're seeing things, imagining things." The lack of empathy, the refusal to even consider the possibility that something beyond normal human understanding was at play, left Sarah feeling isolated and frustrated. No one could understand what she was going through, not really. The phone messages were real, weren't they? The images, the strange warning, it all had to mean something. But what? And why Ryan? Sarah couldn't stop herself from going back to the graveyard again and again. Every visit felt like another step into the unknown, another piece of the puzzle slipping further out of her reach. She felt as though the graveyard itself was calling to her, beckoning her to uncover whatever secret Ryan had left behind. With each visit, she noticed something new, a feeling of heaviness in the air, an unsettling quiet that seemed to thicken around her, as though the land itself was holding its breath. One evening, as dusk settled over the graveyard and the world around her faded into darkness, she stood by Ryan's grave, her heart pounding in her chest. This time, something was different. A cold wind had begun to pick up, whipping through the trees, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She felt a presence, an energy in the air that made her skin crawl. The phones had led her here, but there was more, something more tangible, more real. She could feel it now. The phone in her bag buzzed. Startled, she pulled it out quickly, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it. A message appeared on the screen, one that sent a wave of panic through her. "You're not alone. The truth will find you when you least expect it." The words sent an icy chill down her spine. She looked around the graveyard, half expecting someone to be standing behind her, watching her every move. But there was no one. Just the silent gravestones and the rustling leaves. And then it happened. Something she hadn't anticipated, something that would change everything. A voice, a faint whisper at first, seemed to come from the trees. It was so soft that Sarah thought she might have imagined it, but it was unmistakable. The voice repeated itself, growing louder. "Ryan's secret, it's buried here, the truth is buried here." Her heart raced as she turned toward the sound, her eyes scanning the shadows, but there was no one in sight. The whisper came again, this time clearer, and Sarah's breath hitched as the voice seemed to echo from all directions. "You have to find it, find the truth before it's too late." Suddenly, the world around her seemed to shift. The air grew thick, as if a heavy fog had descended, clouding her mind. Her vision blurred for a moment, and when it cleared, she saw something at the foot of Ryan's grave that had not been there before. A small patch of dirt had been disturbed, the earth broken open in a way that felt unnatural. Without thinking, Sarah dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she began to dig. It was as though an unseen force was guiding her, compelling her to uncover whatever lay beneath the earth. She didn't know why, but she felt an overwhelming urgency. The message, the voice, it had led her here, and she couldn't ignore it. The soil was loose, soft under her hands, and it didn't take long for her to uncover something. Her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. With a surge of adrenaline, she pulled it from the earth. A small, rusted box. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at it, unsure of what to do next. The box was weathered, old, its surface marked with age and wear. There was a small latch, but it appeared to be stuck, as if it hadn't been opened in years. Her heart raced as she fumbled with the latch, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, with a sharp snap, the latch gave way, and the box opened. Inside, there were papers, old, yellowed, brittle with age. She carefully pulled one from the box and unfolded it. The paper was covered in handwriting, the ink faded and hard to read. But there was one word that stood out above the rest, scrawled across the top of the page in bold letters: Project. Below it, in smaller letters, were more details, and as Sarah read, her stomach twisted into knots. It was a project that Ryan had been working on. But it wasn't just any project, it was something far more sinister. The words classified, top secret, and government investigation were scattered throughout the paper. Ryan had been involved in something dangerous, something that he had kept hidden from everyone, even Sarah. The details were sketchy, but it was clear that he had been entangled in something much larger than himself. A project that had the potential to alter everything. Suddenly, a memory from the days leading up to Ryan's death resurfaced in Sarah's mind. He had been acting distant, withdrawn. He had kept to himself more and more, avoiding questions about his work. At the time, Sarah had thought it was just stress from his job, but now, it felt different. The pieces were falling into place, but the more she uncovered, the less she understood. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she realized what this meant. Ryan's death had not been a simple accident. It was connected to this project, to the secrets he had been keeping from her. The shadowy figure in the photograph, Was it someone involved in this? Was it possible that someone had been watching them for longer than she realized? The phone buzzed again, and Sarah nearly jumped out of her skin. She checked it immediately, hoping for answers, for any hint of what was happening. Another message had appeared. "You're closer than you think. They're watching. Don't trust anyone." The words made her blood run cold. Someone was watching her. Someone had been watching them both all along. Sarah's mind spun as she tried to make sense of the situation, but it was impossible. The more she uncovered, the more questions arose. The voice, the box, the warnings, it all pointed to something bigger, something far beyond what she could grasp. As she stood in the graveyard, holding the papers and the phone, she knew that there was no turning back. The truth was buried here, beneath the earth, and if she wanted to uncover it, she would have to dig deeper. But as the wind picked up and the darkness closed in around her, Sarah felt a growing sense of dread. She wasn't just uncovering Ryan's secret. She was walking into a web of lies, and someone, something, did not want her to know the truth. She was no longer just a grieving fiancé. She was part of something much darker, something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. And as she looked around, waiting for something, anything, to make sense of it all, she realized one thing: the mystery had only just begun. The air around Sarah grew heavy with an oppressive silence, the darkening sky hanging above like a threatening veil. She could feel the weight of everything pressing down on her, each breath heavier than the last. She stood still by Ryan's grave, clutching the papers and the phone, her heart thudding loudly in her chest. Her thoughts were a tangled mess, each new revelation pulling her deeper into a nightmare that she couldn't escape. She had thought she was looking for closure, for a way to move on from the pain of losing Ryan. But instead, she had found herself entangled in a web of secrets, lies, and a danger she couldn't yet comprehend. The box she had uncovered from the grave had changed everything. It was as if she had opened a door to a world she was never meant to enter, and now that the door had been opened, there was no going back. The papers in her hands were filled with references to Project X, a government investigation that Ryan had been involved with, but what was the project? What had he uncovered? And why had he kept it all from her? Her mind raced with questions, but there were no answers, only more mysteries. The wind picked up, causing the trees around her to sway and creak ominously, as though they were whispering secrets of their own. She couldn't stay here much longer. The graveyard was starting to feel suffocating, as though it was closing in on her, and with every second, she felt more exposed, more vulnerable. The thought of going back to her apartment crossed her mind, but she knew that there was no real safety there either. Whoever had been leaving the phones, whoever had been sending the messages, was still out there, watching her. With trembling hands, Sarah stuffed the papers back into the box and closed it. She shoved the phone into her jacket pocket, the weight of it now a constant reminder of the dangerous path she had set herself on. She wasn't sure what she was supposed to do with all of this information, but she knew that she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. Someone had to know what was going on. But who? Who could she trust when she didn't even know who was behind the mysterious messages? Her first instinct was to go to the police, but after the way they had dismissed her earlier, she doubted they would take her seriously now. If she told them about the phones, the cryptic messages, the shadowy figure in the photograph, they would think she was losing her mind. The only person she could think of who might understand, who might help, was her best friend, Clara. Clara had always been the logical one, the voice of reason in Sarah's life. She had been there for Sarah through thick and thin, and despite all the strange things happening, Clara had a way of grounding her. Still, Sarah hesitated. Clara lived a few hours away, and the last thing Sarah wanted was to drag her into this mess. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't do this alone. She needed someone she could trust, someone who wouldn't judge her or think she was losing touch with reality. With a sigh, she reached into her pocket and dialed Clara's number. The phone rang 3 times before Clara picked up. "Hey, Sarah," Clara's voice came through, warm and comforting. "What's up?" Sarah swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "Clara, I need you. Something's happening, and I don't know who else to turn to." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Of course, what's going on?" Sarah took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts before speaking. She told Clara everything. The line between fear and clarity began to blur as Sarah poured out everything to Clara, each word heavier than the last. She could feel herself unraveling, the intensity of what she was revealing weighing her down. She spoke rapidly, as if to keep the thoughts from escaping her before she could say them, her voice trembling at times as she described the strange messages, the unearthed box, and the warnings that had appeared on her phone. She didn't leave anything out. It was as if she had been holding the truth inside for so long that it finally erupted in a rush of words. Every detail felt important, even if she couldn't yet connect the dots. When she finished, there was a long silence. Clara didn't say anything right away, and Sarah felt her chest tighten. Had she overreacted? Was she just spiraling into a panic, imagining things that weren't really there? She shifted uneasily on the bench beside Ryan's grave, feeling the cool wind tug at her hair. The stillness in the air felt more ominous now, as if it were a prelude to something terrible. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice calm and steady. "Sarah, listen to me. I know this sounds insane. I do. But I believe you. And I'm coming to you. Stay right where you are. I'll get on the next bus." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Clara was coming. She was coming to help. But what could they even do? What were they supposed to find out from all of this? Could they really uncover the truth behind Ryan's death, or was it already too late? "Clara, I'm scared. I don't know what's happening. There's something bigger than me at play here," Sarah confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know, Sarah. But you're not alone. I'll figure out a plan when I get there. Just keep your head down, okay? Don't do anything crazy. I'm on my way." With the phone still in her hand, Sarah sat there, looking down at the grave beneath her. Ryan's face flashed in her mind, his smile still fresh despite the months that had passed since his death. She couldn't reconcile the image of the man she had loved so much with the mysterious figure she had begun to uncover. The Ryan she knew couldn't have been involved in something dangerous, could he? He had always been protective, kind, and gentle. The Ryan she had shared her life with couldn't have been hiding such a dangerous secret. But everything pointed back to him, the messages, the box, the investigation, she couldn't ignore it. She glanced down at the phone she still gripped tightly in her hand. The screen was dark, but the very presence of the device seemed like a curse now. Every time it buzzed, every time a new message arrived, it dragged her deeper into the unknown. What if whoever was behind all of this was watching her now? What if they were waiting for her to make a mistake, to reveal her next move? She didn't know how much longer she could keep pretending that everything would be okay. It felt like the walls were closing in on her. Her thoughts were scattered, and for a brief moment, she entertained the idea of leaving the graveyard altogether. Maybe running away, starting over somewhere new would be the answer. But then, she quickly dismissed the thought. No matter where she went, the truth would follow. She was already in too deep. She had to know what Ryan had been hiding. She couldn't rest until she had answers. As Sarah gathered herself to leave the graveyard, she heard the faintest sound, a footstep crunching on the gravel path behind her. Her heart stopped, and a jolt of panic surged through her veins. Slowly, she turned, half expecting to see a stranger standing there, someone lurking in the shadows. But there was no one. Just the emptiness of the graveyard, the trees swaying in the breeze, the distant hum of traffic in the distance. Yet, despite the lack of a physical presence, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that someone, something, was still there. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she glanced around, but there was no movement. No one was there. She turned back toward Ryan's grave, her breath shallow. Was it her mind playing tricks on her? Or was she truly being watched? In a daze, she walked out of the graveyard, her legs shaky beneath her as she made her way to the bus stop. The thought of Clara coming to her side provided some comfort, but even that was tainted by the uncertainty of the situation. She didn't want to pull Clara into this mess, but she had no other choice. She needed someone she could trust. Someone who wouldn't dismiss her as crazy. Someone who would help her make sense of the strange puzzle that Ryan had left behind. As she sat down on the bench at the bus stop, Sarah found herself staring at the phone in her hand again. She hadn't noticed that it had buzzed again until just now. She glanced at the screen, a chill running through her as she saw the message. Don't trust Clara. She's not who you think she is. Sarah froze. The words burned into her mind, and for a moment, everything around her seemed to blur. Her hand trembled as she reread the message, her eyes scanning the screen. This had to be some kind of mistake, didn't it? Clara, her best friend? No. That couldn't be true. It had to be a lie, a trap. But why would someone send this to her now? Who was trying to manipulate her? And what did they want from her? A surge of anger rose within Sarah as she looked around again, half expecting someone to be watching her, lurking in the distance. But there was nothing, just the emptiness of the street. The bus would be arriving soon. Clara was coming. But now, uncertainty clouded everything. Sarah didn't know who to trust, what to believe, or even what the truth was anymore. The more she uncovered, the more twisted it all became. Clara's message had sounded so calm, so reassuring. But this was different. Could Clara really be involved in whatever was going on? Sarah shook her head. It didn't make sense. But why would someone send her a warning like this? The truth was slipping further out of reach with every passing moment, like sand falling through her fingers. The bus pulled up to the stop, and Sarah stood, her mind in a whirl of confusion. She took one last look at the phone in her hand. One last glance at the cryptic message. Was this part of the truth? Or was it another layer of deception? With a final breath, Sarah stepped onto the bus, determined to confront whatever awaited her. But deep down, she knew that the world she had once known, the life she had shared with Ryan, was no longer the same. Everything had changed, and she was no longer just Sarah, the grieving fiancé. She was now a player in a game she didn't understand, and every decision from this point on would lead her closer to uncovering the shocking truth, or to her own destruction. The bus rattled along the darkened streets, its headlights cutting through the dense fog that seemed to have settled over the city like a cloak of secrecy. Sarah sat by the window, staring blankly out at the passing scenery, but her thoughts were 1,000 miles away. The cryptic message still burned in her mind, don't trust Clara. She's not who you think she is. Each word echoed in her head, replaying like a broken record, leaving a trail of doubt in its wake. Clara was her best friend, her confidant. She had stood by her through every dark moment of her life. Could it really be true? Could Clara somehow be involved in all of this? Sarah shook her head, as if trying to dislodge the thought. No. It didn't make sense. Clara had always been there for her. She had helped her through Ryan's death, had been the one to comfort her in the darkest moments. There was no way Clara could be a part of whatever this was. Yet, the message lingered in her mind, taunting her with its implications. The bus came to a stop, jolting Sarah back to reality. The familiar street outside signaled that she was close to her apartment. She stood, her legs stiff, and walked down the aisle toward the exit. The air outside was cooler, and the fog had thickened, casting the world in a murky haze. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself as she walked toward the building, feeling a sense of unease settle in her stomach. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. There were no footsteps behind her, no signs of movement, but every corner she turned, every shadow seemed to whisper her name. She quickened her pace, her heart thudding in her chest as she approached her apartment building. The lights inside her building were dim, casting an eerie glow over the hallway as she entered. She didn't want to be alone with her thoughts, but there was no escape. She needed to figure out what was happening. As she reached her door, Sarah hesitated. She had planned to sit down and go over everything again, the messages, the phone, the box, try to make sense of it all. But now, with the weight of the message fresh in her mind, she felt trapped. What if Clara wasn't who she said she was? What if she had been lying to Sarah this entire time? The door clicked open, and Sarah stepped inside. Her apartment felt different now, empty, even. Though she knew it was just her in it. The silence seemed louder than it ever had before, pressing in on her, making her feel like she was suffocating. She dropped her bag by the door and walked into the living room, her eyes falling on the table where she had left the box from the graveyard. The phone was still there, its black screen reflecting the dim light of the room. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at it, as though it might spring to life on its own. She picked it up cautiously, almost expecting it to buzz with another cryptic message. Her fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to turn it on. But what if there was something she missed? What if it held the key to everything? With a deep breath, she swiped the screen, and it came to life, lighting up in her hands. The message app was open, and once again, her heart skipped a beat as she saw the last notification. Don't trust Clara. She's not who you think she is. The words were still there, staring up at her, making her stomach churn with dread. This time, there was no ignoring it. She scrolled back through the messages, reading each one carefully. But the more she read, the more unsettled she became. Each message was more cryptic than the last, the sender's identity hidden behind an anonymous number. They knew things about Ryan, things about Sarah, things that shouldn't have been possible. How were they getting this information? And why were they targeting her? Sarah sat down at the table, her hands trembling as she set the phone down in front of her. She had to figure this out. She couldn't let it control her anymore. If someone was watching her, if someone was manipulating her, she needed to find out who they were and why. The only way to do that was to confront Clara. As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a call. The name on the screen made her blood run cold. Clara. Sarah stared at the phone, her fingers frozen above it. She had been preparing herself to face Clara, to confront her about the warning, but now that the moment was here, she hesitated. What if Clara was behind all of this? What if everything Sarah had trusted about their friendship had been a lie? But what if it wasn't? What if Clara really was trying to help her, and the message was just another ploy to turn her against her? The phone buzzed again, breaking her thoughts. Clara was calling again. Taking a deep breath, Sarah answered. Clara? Her voice was shaky, uncertain. Sarah, Clara's voice came through, sounding calm, but there was an edge to it. I'm outside your apartment. Can I come up? Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected Clara to arrive so soon. Was she really just here to help, or was she somehow involved in all of this? Yeah, sure, Sarah stammered, standing up from the table. I'll buzz you in. As she went to unlock the door, a thought crossed her mind. What if Clara was playing a part in something much bigger than either of them realized? What if Ryan had been involved in something dangerous, and Clara was trying to protect her from it? Or worse, what if Clara herself had been involved in some way, and this was all a carefully constructed plan to draw Sarah deeper into a trap? The buzzer sounded, pulling Sarah from her spiraling thoughts. She took one last breath before pressing the button to allow Clara inside. Her pulse quickened as the door creaked open, and there stood Clara, looking as calm and collected as ever. Her presence brought a momentary sense of comfort, but underneath it, Sarah couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut. Clara stepped inside, giving Sarah a small, reassuring smile. "I came as quickly as I could," Clara said, closing the door behind her. "Are you okay? You look shaken." Sarah swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. "I don't know what's going on, Clara. Everything, doesn't make sense." She paused, glancing at the phone on the table. "I got a message, saying that I shouldn't trust you. It said that you weren't who I thought you were." Clara's face faltered for just a moment, a flicker of something in her eyes before she quickly regained her composure. "Sarah, you know me. I'm your best friend. You've got to know I'd never hurt you." But the uncertainty lingered in Sarah's mind, gnawing at her, making it hard to fully believe Clara's words. Was Clara telling the truth, or was she simply playing her part in a far larger game? There was no way to know for sure. Clara took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Listen, I know this is overwhelming. But there's more going on here than you realize. There's a reason you found that phone, and there's a reason why people are targeting you. I can help you, but we need to figure this out together." Sarah's mind raced as Clara's words echoed in her head. "We need to figure this out together." For a moment, the thought of joining forces with Clara seemed like the only thing that made sense. But then, the words from the mysterious message replayed in her mind once again. "Don't trust Clara." And in that instant, Sarah realized that she might not be able to trust anyone at all.